Hi guys, this is Sheldon, and in this video series I will try to go over each class on Turtle WoW, covering all their changes, their new abilities, and how these might affect their capabilities in both leveling, PvE and PvP, as well as how they might create new opportunities for new builds and playstyles. And in today's video, we'll be taking a closer look at the Priest here on Turtle WoW. It is now time to take a look at the Priest here on Turtle WoW and what they've changed. And before we start, I want to say I am not knowledgeable in the Priest class, and I really wanted to bring someone on board this video. I tried to reach out to the community and ask if somebody would be interested to come on to a casual talk here on maybe on Discord. And I wanted somebody who had some knowledge not only in how Priest performs in PvE, but also in PvP. But sadly, that didn't happen. So guys, you're stuck with me on this one. The door is still open for people to come on with the remaining classes. I still need to cover the warrior class, the warlock, the druid, and the mage. So if anyone out there feel like they are knowledgeable about those classes and would like to contribute to a video like this, please reach out and comment on this video, or you can reach me on the Discord server, on the Turtle WoW Discord server. I'm also in there. You can tag me. I use the same name as I use here on my YouTube channel. So if it has any interest, shoot me a message and we'll figure something out. But here we are, Priest. Let's read the words of the developers. Priest as a whole functions very well, both as a healer and a damage dealer, since the change is done with our first batch of class changes, though is not without its issues. First and foremost, discipline was quite neglected in our first batch of changes, failing to give it tools that allows it to be functional and viable by itself instead of being just a secondary specialization you go into for a few tools. Secondly, the Holy Tree is quite independent of its talent trees to perform well as a healer, perhaps too independent. This allowed Holy to specialize deep into discipline instead of its own tree, making it feel redundant for the most part. You can read more about these issues in our solutions to them in each specialization's own section. Alright, starting off with the baseline changes, every priest is now getting spell power instead of attack power on their inner fire. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, which probably you guys would have to do with many things now covering the priest, but I think the attack power part was added in the first round of changes. And now here in the second round, they are changing attack power to spell power instead. And the final rank gives you 74 spell power. That seems like an insane amount of spell power. That seems really, really, really strong. Maybe too strong, I think. It seems, it just seems incredibly strong. Like getting this amount of spell power right as you ding 60 without even having a single item with spell power on is just, that's a lot of spell power for the priest. That is really, really strong. And then the mana cost of different spells, especially these buff spells that you do to buff your party, has been reduced significantly. So you see Power Word Fortitude has been like a third, costs now a third amount of mana. Same with Prayer of Fortitude. Divine Spirit is half mana. Prayer of Spirit is half mana as well. Shadow Protection reduced by a little bit, from 650 to 445. Prayer of Shadow Protection also reduced by around 25%. Feedback has also been reduced mana costs by half. Pain Spike no longer requires Shadow Form to learn and can be cast outside Shadow Form. And I went back to look at what Pain Spike is. That's a new spell they added to Priest in the first round of changes. And if I remember correctly, let me just check it. It's something to do with you put a shadow damage spell on the target. It has 15-second cooldown. It does instantly a small amount of shadow damage that then begins to heal itself over 5 seconds after landing. So it's kind of like, is it Shadow Word Death that they got in a later expansion? Does that do the same thing? I think it does. I am not sure. And then Pain Spike now has new ranks that are required at earlier levels. And I think that previously Pain Spike was only acquired at level 60. Now it's acquired first rank at level 30. And the current rank of Pain Spike has been converted into the first rank, so it has been reduced in damage. It's not the exact same damage that the current one has, as far as I can see. So the last rank, level 60, has also been increased in damage slightly. It seems like this is a sort of a finisher. You put this on your target when you can actually, like an execute basically, for priest, semi-small execute. Okay, next one, Power Word Shield. Power scaling coefficient has been increased from 10% to 35%. Scaling on your Power Word Shield is incredibly strong, but now they're buffing it by an insane amount, and I'm afraid that priests are literally gonna be unkillable. Not only are you getting spell power from inner fire, but you're also getting a lot more scaling on your shields, meaning that they will last for a lot longer and block a lot more damage. But moving on, mana burn has been moved from the discipline specialization to the shadow specialization. Developer comment: this change allows mana burn to benefit from the talents in the shadow talent tree. I think that makes sense with the placement for sure. But now this makes me even more afraid of shadow priests in PvP, because if they can't just outright kill you, they can just burn your mana. Not that killing you was ever a problem. I think I consider Shadow Priest and Warlock among the absolute top tier PvPers in a 1v1 scenario. Fear Ward is now baseline learned at level 20. Every priest is getting Fear Ward now. And then Dwarf priests are getting a new racial due to Fear Ward becoming baseline. This quest, the quest to acquire your level 20 priest racial will reset if you're a dwarf, and you can get your new racial for this reason. New racial is shown below, which is now Avatar. Turn your target to stone, increasing their armor by 25% and increasing all resistance by an amount equal to 150% of your level for 15 seconds, meaning you're getting 25% more armor and you're getting 90 resistance to all spell schools. It's a 30-yard range, it has a 1 minute cooldown and costs 6% base mana. This is an insanely strong, not only against casters, but also against, especially if you put it on a warrior or a plate-wearing class, increasing the target's armor by 25% seems for 15 seconds on a 1 minute cooldown, 30-yard range. You're gonna have like way over the top. Way over the top. Maybe nerf this down to 15% armor and make this, I don't know, maybe just 100% of your level. Make it for, you can keep it on 15 seconds maybe, or maybe that's too much, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, and put a 5-minute cooldown on it. And then you have something a lot more reasonable. Everyone was still gonna wanna be a shadow priest, dwarf shadow priest now with this racial. This seems quite strong. And then Elun's Grace has also been removed, which is the Night Elf. I'm guessing it's the Night Elf racial. Night Elf priest will now be able to use bows with the ability to shoot, to auto-shoot, and learn the ability Searing Shot at level 20. The new racial is shown below. Fire a Searing Arrow dealing damage plus X amount of dealing weapon damage plus X amount of fire damage. And here you have the ranks, final ranks. Final rank is 68 to 74 additional fire damage. This costs 5% base mana, has a 10-second cooldown, and scales 33% with your spell power. Rank 5 will be learned using a book. We'll leave it up to you to discover the source of this rank. Developer comment 2. Reflect the origin of Night Elf priests. In the Priestess of the Moon, we are giving them the ability to wield bows, just like Tyrande Whisperwind did in Warcraft 3. This is rooted in the lore of every priestess of Elun, being a skilled huntress as well. So this is extremely interesting, and I actually like it. This is very flavorful and very cool. I kind of wish this was done to the hunter, because hunter badly needs something that goes through armor that scales with your spell damage, which Arcane Shot does not scale with anything, I think. They could also have went in a way towards another like hunter-esque spec. So you have your Shadow Priest, that's the spellcaster niche you're fulfilling there. And then you have your healer, but the priest has always had 2 healing specs, right? It had the discipline spec, which is basically a healing spec, protection healing spec-ish, and the holy one, which is also just another healing spec. But what if the discipline spec with that one, they went for like another bow build, like maybe some dark shadow hunter-esque build? I know that's very far from what what vanilla intended it to be, probably, but I think it would have been cool to have just something completely different from the regular classical priest specs, or rather something different than just having 2 healing specs. But I know they are going to look into discipline. So and they are, I think they're gonna go with some more damage-esque build in the discipline tree now. But it is kind of cool, and we only have one class in the game that uses a bow, which is the hunter. Now, if you roll a night elf, you can use a bow as well, so that's nice. Maybe in the future they'll double down on this, and we'd actually get a, let's say, a marksman or archer, ranger archer archetype with the priest that primarily uses spell enhanced arrows and has many hunter-like abilities, but in a priestess of the moon or a Tyrande Whisperwind type of way. So you're an archer, but with more spell damage, and you build a hunter around plus spell damage and not agility. That could be cool to see something like that. But let's move on. Lightwell has gotten a number of changes. No longer removed on damage taken. The Lightwell cannot be re-clicked while you have the heal over time effect already on you. Lightwell's Renew Heal Over Time effect scales 17% with your healing power and benefits from talents that buff your healing amount, such as Spiritual Healing and Shift Recovery. A new rank of Lightwell is acquired at level 30, with the current ranks being shifted up by 1. So this has become baseline. Every priest gets Lightwell. The hot is no longer removed if you take damage. It's not reclickable, which was the biggest problem, I think, or one of the bigger problems why you didn't go for it as a holy priest in vanilla. Among other problems, apparently there were no scaling, so they added that, which is quite nice. But I kind of think that maybe with all the buffs that the priest is getting, and then putting Lightwell down before duel, just clicking on that whenever you take some damage, and you'll have a constant hot going on you on top of the other hots, renew and other stuff, you shields and stuff that you have. It's gonna be they're gonna be tough in PvP maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see, but it sounds a little bit too good. Let's read here. They say the base healing values for ranks above level 30 and spell power scaling for all ranks have been reduced by 15% for the following spells: Lesser Heal, Renew, Heal, Flash Heal, Prayer of Healing, Greater Heal, Desperate Prayer, and Lightwell. And developer comment: this change has been done alongside a buff to spiritual healing. The introduction of Swift Recovery and updates to Lightwell, making it a useful part of the healer's toolkit. Most players have felt that the majority of healing talents haven't felt important enough for most healers, which caused them to go deeper into the discipline tree instead of the holy. The healing output should be about the same as before, if not higher, when holy is talented deeper. Okay, so there is some nerf that you can only make up for if you go deep into holy, and they're talking about something spiritual healing and swift recovery. So let's see, is that talents? I'm guessing those are talents in the holy tree. Swift recovery, spiritual. This spiritual guidance. It wasn't spiritual guidance, right? It was spiritual healing. Here we have swift recovery. The amount healed by your healing spells is increased by 3, then 6% if the target is affected by renew. And down here we have spiritual healing. Increase the amount healed by your healing spells by 30%. So that's probably why they felt the need to nerf the base healing on the healing spells, which would then make Shadow Priest not so overpowered, I think, because maybe they're getting something new, but they're nerfing the healing output. Maybe that would be enough to make up for it. Anyway, rarely I see the need for a Shadow Priest to go out of his shadow form and heal, actually. Now that I think about it, usually the shields are enough to keep him alive and burst somebody down. But we're moving on to the discipline tree now, and let's read the words. Discipline really lacks any sort of identity outside of a few spells such as Power Word Shield and Power Infusion. Instead of treading the same path done by other expansions, we've decided to steer this specialization into another way, reworking discipline into a holy damage dealing support specialization. The first part of this is the damage dealing capabilities. So this will be properly tuning Smite and Holy Fire abilities to be reliable tools, add new talents to integrate Holy Fire into the rotation of this revamped specialization, and a talent that allows you to properly benefit from the critical strike chance stat, differentiating from Shadow as a damage dealing specialization. And that's because Shadow is mainly just a dot way of damaging. You don't really benefit, you don't really want critical strike as a Shadow Priest. You usually just want a lot of spell power. The second part is the support-centric abilities that lean into the fantasy of both being disciplined and disciplining others, granting powerful boons at the cost of some health, which also synergizes with your shielding capabilities, absorbing this damage. Very interesting. Smite has seen a few buffs. Increased damage values by 10%, reduced mana cost for the following ranks. So rank from rank 3, it seems, and onward, there's been a mana cost reduction. And it's not it's actually quite significant, right? It's a third, something like that. Maybe a little bit less. So that's nice. Holy Fire has seen multiple buffs. Increased initial cast spell power scaling coefficient from 85 to 100%. Okay, so 100% of your spell power is affecting Holy Fire now. And this was already increased before. Note this was increased from 60% in the first iteration of class changes. So it started off in vanilla by being 60%. Then the second class changes, the previous class changes, went to 85%. Now it's 100%. So all of your spell power, every single point, is going straight into Holy Fire. And on top of that, the base damage has been increased by 10%. Now that's a lot of damage. Developer comment, these changes are meant to compensate the removal of the original Searing Light, scale the mana cost and spell power coefficients proportionally to its base cast time. We'll be keeping a close eye on these abilities due to the numerous buffs and will make adjustments as needed. Yes, please keep a close eye on all of this. But, once again, I have to give the Turtle WoW team credit. This is not Blizzard we're talking about. These are the Turtle WoW devs, and they are fast and they are precise in their tunings. If this was done by Blizzard, something that would be overpowered would be kept overpowered for a year or maybe even more. And then all of a sudden Blizzard realizes it's too much. Instead of just nerfing it slightly and bring it in line with everything else, they nerf it completely to the ground. I don't believe that the Turtle WoW will do that. I think they are much more, They are much more precise in the way they adjust things. So I have a lot of confidence in them looking at things, listening to the community, and having a finger on the pulse, right? That's the point of it. If they have a finger on the pulse, they know what's going on, and they will adjust numbers if needed. I just really hope they're not just looking at PvE, right? They're looking at PvP as well. As I've said in pretty much every video, PvP, in my opinion, is the most important to balance than PvE. That's just my opinion. Next up, wand specialization now requires 2 points instead of 5 points. Increase your chance to hit with wands by 10% and gives your wands a chance to grant you a amount of mana equal to your level. This chance is increased with every point. So that's this one here, wand specialization. It now increases your chance to hit. First off, it increased the damage by 25%, which I think it also did before. But now also a 10% hit. Extra hit chance, that's a lot. That's better than, isn't it better than the mage's wand specialization? There it is. No, it's also been, they've done the same thing. Successful wand attacks restore mana is increased with every point the amount stored. Okay, we haven't gotten to the mage yet, but it's nice to see they are consistent throughout the different wand using classes. I don't know if Warlock has anything with wand. I don't think they have. They have enough stats anyway. But yeah, they're getting some mana back using the wand now, so that's very interesting. Very nice. A new talent, Piercing Light, first row, 3 points, reduce the chance for enemies to resist your holy and discipline. That fits in with the other specs as well. You have this one here in Shadow that reduces the target's chance to resist your shadow spells. This one is just the same, just for discipline instead, and holy spells. So that's your smite and your holy fire. And they, of course, would need something like that, especially for PvE, if they really want to go with this smite priest type of build, which it seems like they're going for. Mental agility, move from the 4th row to the 1st row, and now also reduce the mana cost of your offensive, holy, and discipline spells by 10%. That is this one. Reduce the mana cost of your instant cast and offensive, holy, and discipline. So it also reduced the mana cost of your Shadow Word Pain, since that's instant cast. I'm guessing also your shields, because those are every spell basically that's instant cast. Renew as well. Everything that's instant cast, it seems like they're reducing damage by 10%. So 10% isn't much, but that's nice. We'll take it. Spell warding moved from the 2nd row in discipline to the 2nd row to discipline. What? Move from holy. Oh, to the discipline row and requires 3 points instead of 5 points. So spell warding has been moved from holy to discipline. Which one is that? That's this one. Reduce all spell damage taken by 10%. And actually have this one here as well. Increase the chance to resist stun, fear, and silence effect by 15%. That's a lot of resistance right there. That's a really powerful talent, I think, for PvP. Unbreakable Will, move from the first row to the second row. Is that... Oh, that is this one. I was just hovering over the resistance. Yep, nice. Improved Inner Fire, move from the fourth to the third row and requires 2 points instead of 3 points. Developer comment, this talent also affects the newly added spell damage increase component of Inner Fire 2. So what? So 30%. So basically you're getting 100 spell power from your Inner Fire, right? Wasn't it about 70 spell power you were getting from Inner Fire? Yeah, if you get the book, that's 74. No, sorry, that's not the one. Inner Fire. 74 spell damage from Inner Fire, and 30% to that isn't that 100 spell damage? I'm pretty sure it is. So yeah, that's insanely strong. You'll never want to be without Inner Fire on you at all times, basically. So very nice. Good for the priests. Seems overpowered. Next up, improve Power Word Shield. Move from the second to the third row. That's this one. 15% more damage absorbed by a Power Word Shield, which is already now scaling more, isn't it? Yeah, it's scaling more. 35% instead of 10%. I'm just afraid that you won't even break the shield on a priest when trying to damage him or kill him. New talent, Searing Light. Fourth row, 3 points. Your damaging holy and discipline spells criticals have a 100% chance to cause your next smite spell to be instant cast and cost no mana. Lasts 10 seconds. So whenever you're either holy fire or smite, I'm guessing, you get a critical on one of those, your next smite will be instant and cost no mana. Developer comment, as a note, instant cast smites still trigger your global cooldown. In a pure damage output sense, this equals to a 0.5 cast time reduction, but the talent giving an instant cast gives discipline movement flexibility in movement intensive boss fights and player combat. Yeah, but maybe breaking down the numbers, this isn't as much in a PvE fight, but when you can move and cast an instant smite in a PvP scenario, that's a different story. So that'll be very interesting to see priests in PvP now. New talent, Purifying Flames. Fourth row, 2 points. Your holy fire has a 100% chance to increase your holy damage by 12% for 8 seconds. Nice. So there's a little buff. That's what they were talking about before, incorporating holy fire into your rotation. So you actually want to use this in burst windows or just to keep this buff going. Maybe 8 seconds isn't a long time. So, but you will probably get in a few smites before you have to start casting your holy fire again. Mental strength requires 3 points instead of 5 points. Increase total intellect instead of mana, and now also increase your casting speed by 3%. Let's take a look at the talents. That's the Purifying Flames. It gives you the Holy Fire buff, or the Holy Damage buff, using a Holy Fire. And Searing Light right here, your damaging Holy and Discipline spells can have a chance to cause your next smite to be instant and cost no mana. You would probably, if you want to level as a Discipline Priest, you'd go for your beeline down to this one, making sure you get this as soon as possible. Or maybe not. Because you're not really critting that much while you're leveling, right? You'd actually still want to go for Divinity first and then maybe even Divine Fury. Someone in the comments probably knows a lot more than me when it comes to priest leveling and what you should go for. But it seems like there are some interesting options now, very interesting options now in the discipline tree. I think usually people would go Shadow, at least at level 40, they would probably go Shadow. I do not know if they would still go Shadow as a leveling build once you reach level 40 now, since all of the buffs to discipline. We will have to see. Let's move on. New talent, Enlightenment for 5th row keystone. Bring a party member under your tutelage. Whenever you cast a damaging discipline or holy spell, you have a 15% chance to burn them for 4% of their total health as holy damage and increase your and their spell damage and healing by 10% for 8 seconds. So you're damaging your allies. Interesting. But you're then giving them, so if they get the damage, if they take the 4% to the health, then they get a buff for 8 seconds, increasing their spell damage and healing output by 10%. If this spell is used on yourself, the spell damage and healing bonus is increased by 15%. So instead of 10% for 8 seconds, it's 15% for 8 seconds. You can only have one party member under your tutelage at a time, last 30 minutes. Okay, so it's a long buff. Cost 10% base mana, 1 minute cooldown. Instant card 30 out of your range. That's a very different thing. Very interesting. You can actually kill your party members with this one, I'm guessing. So if they are already low and you start spamming this one, you get some lucky or maybe unlucky, however you want to put it, procs, then you would actually be able to kill your ally. So 4% of their total health, not the current health. If this was current health, then you maybe wouldn't be able to outright kill your allies. But because it's total health, it's gonna be the same exact damage unless the party member starts unequipping their gear or something. So that's gonna be a lot of damage every time this one procs. And it is a 15% chance, so I'm really guessing that in a fight where you can just stand there, spam your smites and your holy fire, and you're getting instant cast smites after that, and you're just gonna proc this a lot, right? Especially when you get those instant cast smites. So if you crit a lot, those were dependent on crit, right? Staring light, yeah, crits. So if you get a high amount of crit on your priest, then you start getting a lot of these instant cast smites, and that's gonna proc this one even more. So I'm guessing you would definitely want a healer on the guy that you're using this buff or debuff, however you would think of it on. Or maybe you usually just put it on yourself, because you are benefiting the most if you put it on yourself. And then your shield, you would have to be on top of shielding yourself constantly in order to not pressure your healers in a PvE environment, to make sure you don't those. It's much like actually it's much like the warlock's life spirit tap, life tap is life tap or something that gives them mana. But it is very interesting. New talent, Resurgent Shield, 5th row, capstone. When your power word shield is broken, 25% of its damage cost is refunded. Additionally, your damage done by holy spells and effects will be increased by 6% of your shield's total absorption amount for 8 seconds. Is this the remaining absorption on the shield, or is it just the total amount of absorption? That's a lot. That could be a lot, right? What is the shield able to absorb? Like now with all the buffs, somewhere around 1,000 to maybe 1,500 damage, maybe even more. I don't actually have a clue, but I'm just, whenever I fight priests as a hunter or a shaman or not as a shaman, I just purge the shield as a shaman, or a rogue for that matter, it always feels like it's several thousand damage that the shield is absorbing. And now with the increased buffs, let's just say 1,500, right? So it's 90 more damage on your holy spells. Maybe that's not that overpowered then. Maybe it's not that much. But anyway, a nice increase, right, to have. Developer comment: this talent ties in the shield aspects of the specialization to the new holy damage dealing role as discipline now has, rewarding them for successfully blocking damage with their shields. Reflective shields removed, which was a talent from the previous set of changes. I think that would reflect the damage you would take as a priest with your shield active. So it will reflect an amount of 20 or something, I think, if I recall correctly. But let's take a look at the talents in here actually. Resurgent Shields, that's this one. There's one talent point for this one. You still have your inner focus, Force of Will. We're getting to that one. That seems really, really strong as well. And Chastise. Force of Will now increase the amount of damage absorbed by a power word shield by 20%. Now also increases by 20%. So it increased the spell damage and critical strike chance of your offensive spells by 5%, and the amount absorbed by a power word shield by 20%. So we're really getting some insanely strong power word shields now. And you have this one that also increase your critical strike chance with holy spells. So that's 10% extra critical strike chance with holy spells. And this one reduced the cast time. So you would, as a disciplined priest, you would definitely want these two as well. And maybe also holy reach, giving you some extra range. And maybe even spiritual guidance if you can get to that. Or some extra spell damage, so you benefit more from your spirit. We haven't gotten this far yet, so let's get back to this one. New talent, Chastise. 7th row, capstone, chastise the target, causing X to Y holy damage and disorientating enemies for 3 seconds. Any damage caused will remove the effect. If the target is an ally, their attack and casting speed is increased by a percentage for 6 seconds. increased to 8 seconds if the damage critically strikes an ally. So you're back to damaging your allies. That's why you're disciplining your allies. Cannot be used on allies with less than 50% health and below X level. Check below. Okay, it costs 6% mana. It has only a 30-second cooldown. That's basically that's scatter shot with a lot of damage. Spell damage, power scaling, spell power scaling, 65% of your spell power. It has 30-yard range, which is affected by Holy Reach instant cast, so giving it 20% on top of the 30. I don't know how much is that in yards. Quick maths, that's another 6 yards. So that's 36 yards range on this. So basically a scatter shot with 36-yard range on a 30-second cooldown that does a ton of damage. That's crazy strong. Damage values, haste increased amount, and level limitations. Rank 1 does this much damage, gives 10% haste, and cannot be used on targets below 35, level 35. And rank 2 is a little bit more damage, a little bit extra haste, goes to 30% haste, and then cannot be used on players under level 45, 35, 45, 55. Okay, and that's just to make sure that you're not killing somebody. They're just making sure that, okay, at least someone has this amount of base damage, and since you can't use it on a target below this amount of health, they're just making sure that you're not griefing people with this this talent. And then power infusion has been removed. So that's a very, very, very strong utility button for priests. You can use it on yourself to gain a haste buff for 6 seconds or 8 seconds if it crits, or you can use it as a scatter shot on a target to disorient them, interrupt whatever they're doing, maybe heal yourself, and then get back into fighting. And it's on a 30-second cooldown, and it scales with a ton of your spell power, so it's actually also an execute ability. And you're still getting Pain Spike, right? So you even though you're disciplined, you can still use Pain Spike. You can still use Shadow Word Pain. You can still use your Mind Blast. You can use a lot of instant cast damage on top of your Holy Fire and your Smite, which are the cornerstones of this build, right? I think Discipline seems incredibly strong and maybe even a little bit too strong for PvP. I was already putting priests up on S tier, and now they're maybe up there alone. We'll have to see once we get to the Warlock and the Mages, see how much they've gotten. I want to make sure that that we're taking a look at what else the priest did get, actually. Because these are the baseline changes, right? Holy Fire initial damage component scaling, so it already increased the scaling. Lightwell is baseline. Divine Spirit is baseline. Inner Fire gives attack power. That's been changed to spell power, and it's a lot of fucking spell power. Fear Ward is baseline to all priests, so that's gonna mitigate a fear. Shadow Form reduce the spell mana cost of spells. You got Pain Spike. That's a sort of a execute type of damage dealing spell, and you have Shadow Mend that actually heals you while you have some little healing while in shadow form. It has a great cooldown and it comes with a lot of mana cost, but I don't know if they've removed this actually, but those were the previous changes. I know that they've added a ton to shadow to give it more mana back, and it was already really like the only way as a hunter you can beat a good or skilled and geared shadow priest is to mana drain him. But since mana draining has been nerfed for hunters and priests, specifically Shadow Priest, has seen a lot of buffs, that's not going to be the way to kill a Shadow Priest anymore. Of course, Hunters already also seen a lot of damage buffs, so maybe it's not as overpowered as you would think. Only time will tell. But anyway, we are moving on to Holy. Holy performs quite well in all types of content, but the majority of this talent tree tends to feel optional at times, causing Holy healers to specialize more into discipline instead of the actual tree. We plan to nudge them in the other direction with a buff to the healing, increasing talents while applying baseline nerfs to the healing. That's what we read before. They were nerfing baseline healing, and they get a talent down here that buffs the healing output by 30%. Meaning they can get the original healing power back by specializing deep into the tree. Additionally, some of the talents were adjusted to also work with the revamped discipline and its support damage abilities. Healing Focus renamed to Holy Focus and affects all holy spells instead of just healing spells. I don't know what impact this has, but someone in the comment section will probably tell me. Holy specialization renamed to divinity and affects holy and discipline spells. Let's do this and just check. That's holy focus, divinity, affects holy and discipline spells. Okay, so it's just because since Chastise is also going to be a discipline ability, so they want the extra crit to also affect Chastise. So it's everything that's being affected, right? And this is a 30-second cooldown, so it's a quite strong ability that you're getting, which is instant cast with 10% more crit chance on this one as well. Martyrdom moved from the second row discipline to the second row in holy and named Blessed Concentration. Blessed Concentration. There it is. Yeah, increase gives you a chance to gain focus casting effect that lasts 6 seconds after being the victim of a melee or ranged critical strike. Focus casting effect prevent you from losing casting time when taking damage and increases the resistance to interrupt effects. And it is quite strong. Holy Reach moved from 4th row to the 2nd row and now affects all offensive holy and discipline spells. So making sure that those discipline priests get their 36-yard range on the spells. Holy Nova now causes normal threat. Okay. Searing Light removed. I don't know what that was. New talent, Swift Recovery, 4th row, 2 points connects to improved renew. The amount healed by your healing spells is increased by 6% if the target is affected by renew. Okay, that's this one. The amount healed by your healing spells is increased by 6% if the target is affected by renew. Improved healing now includes Prayer of Healing. That's this one. It includes Prayer of Healing. It apparently didn't. Or Spiritual Guidance moved from the 5th row to the 4th row. So it was down here before and it's up here now, making it a lot easier to get even if you're deep into discipline. And now comes the healing part, spiritual healing, giving you a 30% extra healing on your healing spells, making sure that every healer would actually want to go deep into the holy tree in order to get your powerful healing, which I think makes a lot of sense because being too much of a healer while also being a damage dealer in either discipline or shadow is definitely something that's needed with all the buffs that both shadow and discipline has received, especially discipline. So because as shadow you can't really use your holy spells while in shadow form, so that would force you to swap out of your shadow form, which is another global cooldown, which is also a lot of mana cost that adds to going in and out of shadow form. But especially I think this for shadow not for shadow priest, but for discipline priests, bringing this sort of a nerf to the healing now that you can go this deep into discipline and make it a really strong damage dealing build. I do definitely think this needs to be here, and maybe it needs to be even maybe you even need to nerf healing more now that the discipline priests, they don't need to swap out of a form and waste mana or something like that. They can just stand there, heal. So they don't really have the problems or the issues that a shadow priest has. And you could say, okay, shadow priest has some silence going for them, and maybe they also are the strongest damage wise. But Chastise is basically an interrupt as well. So I would say that these two might be somewhat equally strong. This isn't useful in any way on a physical class, right? This isn't useful in any way on a warrior or a rogue or a hunter, but this is interrupting a hunter mid his aimed shot, right? You're mitigating a ton of damage that way, and you're creating an ability, you're creating the possibility to heal yourself for 3 seconds, and you don't need to spend a global cooldown to get out of some sort of form in order to start healing yourself. So it's just basically straight up, you hit the target with Chastise and you pump a big heal into yourself and you shield up again, and then you're full health, right? So that is gonna be very interesting to see how that's gonna work out in PvP for sure. Improved Prayer of Healing has been removed. Let's actually just bring up the old talent trees, because there's a lot of this I do not know anything about. Improved Prayer of Healing, that's this one. Reduce the mana cost of your Prayer of Healing. You can definitely see they've brought in a lot more, seems like they've brought in a lot more talent options. All right, Spirit of Redemption now increase your spirit by 5% in addition to its current effect. And that's this one. So an extra 5% to your spirit. And this one was just basically, this was just the effect of being able to heal while actually dead. And this increase the amount of damage and healing by percentage of your spirit. And does humans still have 5% extra spirit? I think they do, don't they? So this is 10% if you're a human, plus this spirit guidance, spiritual guidance. And now that you're getting, what was it, baseline, they're getting some spirit buff baseline. Divine Spirit is baseline. That's also going to help Priest a ton when leveling. Getting this at level 30 and maybe at level 35, or is it at level 30? Yeah, at level 30, you can also actually get this. So maybe this would be the right way to level as a, I don't know, maybe as a sort of disciplined priest, you would go get spiritual guidance instead of Searing Light, because again, as we talked about before, this isn't as impactful if you're not critting a lot, which you won't be when you're leveling, if you're not geared for crit. But you can get a lot of spirit, and you can get a ton of spirit on your gear while leveling, and that's also gonna just support you leveling. So going heavy spirit build, then getting spirit tap, as well as some extra wand specialization for the extra mana, finishing off targets. You're not ever gonna go and you're gonna get a ton of extra damage. And if you're a human, that's 10% extra. If they still have the 5% with Spirit of Redemption, that's a 10% increase to your spirit. But then, of course, you are missing out on Inner Fire. That's a 30. Well, it's not a 30%. It's not a 30 spell power at the lower levels. It's only at the max level. There's probably something like 15 spell damage on this talent here at the early levels. What else is you missing? You would be missing Meditation, which is also some mana regeneration. But I do think that this would make up for that. Let's just do a fast leveling build. Maybe some Reach, or maybe Blessed Recovery. I think Holy Focus is probably damage while casting Holy Spell. Maybe this one is because if you need to heal yourself, you want to make sure you can actually do that without getting interrupted and constantly pushed back. But maybe your shields would make up for that. I don't know. I do not know enough about priests. So let's just take something. Let's do this. And then get your spiritual guidance. So this is your level 30, right? You probably wouldn't start with this to begin with. You'd go for your wand specialization. And then likely you would just go spirit tap. So you're getting this a little bit later, right? You're getting it at around level 40 or something. So maybe something like this would be your early leveling build. And then you would continue into, you probably respec at some point and continue down in the discipline tree once you can get Chastise. Or maybe Shadow is still the play. I do not know actually, but time will tell. New talent, Reservoir of Light. 5th row, 3 points. Increase the amount of charges on your Lightwell by 5. That's this one. So a lot more charge. I don't know how many charges Lightwell has originally, but 5 charges? It seems like a lot. Especially if you get this baseline, right? At what level do you actually get Lightwell? Do we know this? You get it at level 40, it seems. So that's gonna help you as well, I think, while leveling. Maybe I don't know how much mana this costs to make the Lightwell, but yeah, very nice. Especially now with the improved stuff, you're not removing the buff if you take damage, and you can't press it again, so you're not overriding it, even if you press it before it's over. And then we have spiritual healing. Healing increased that has been increased by, instead of 10%, 30%. So that's a huge buff to healing to mitigate or to make up for the nerfs. Developer comment: this change has been done to compensate for the baseline healing nerfs, which you can read up more about in the baseline changes section. All right, so that's pretty much it for Holy. Not a lot, but some things that were quite or are quite strong, not only in the Holy tree, but also baseline. And they have the new talent, which we didn't actually cover, which is Proclaimed Champion. Proclaim a friendly champion for 2 hours, increasing their armor by 230. All resistance by 10, and allows you to use various champion spells on them. In addition, you gain mana equal to 1% of the damage taken by your champion. Only one champion can be proclaimed at a time. Almost getting throat fucked while I try to pronounce this. Proclaimed. And actually, I think we have the Proclaimed Champion. I don't know if some of these, I think some of these has been removed. But here were the different, or are the different champion proclamations you can make. Grace, Bond, Empower Champion, Resolve, Revive Champion. And I don't think, did they cover those in the baseline changes? No, it doesn't seem like they did. But I do think that there has been some changes to this Proclaimed Champion thing. But I'm not sure. All right, moving on to Shadow. We're quite happy with the current design of Shadow and its support capabilities as a Shadow damage dealer, enhancer, and mana battery via Vampiric Embrace. So there won't be any major changes to the specialization aside from some number tuning. Nerfs mainly aimed at player combat, power, and the talent move from discipline. Pain Spike. Spell power scaling coefficient has been reduced from 43 to 25%. And its cooldown has been increased from 30 seconds to 40 seconds. Okay. Blackout duration reduced from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. That also seemed like a strong, whenever you would get blackout, which you would get quite often, I think. It is a quite strong, it's a strong stun. But then we have Mind Flay spell power coefficient has been increased from 45 to 75. And that's also something I think is quite needed in a way that you don't actually see many Shadow Priests using Mind Flay. It's usually just they are using Shadow Wave Pain and they're using Mind Blast? Yeah. So I think this one maybe makes sense. But then Mind Blast spell power scaling coefficient has been increased from 42 or 43 to 60%. Note this does not affect pre-level 20 ranks. Vampiric Embrace now has a 2-second cast time. Developer comment, while this change hardly matters for combat against creatures, it adds precious few seconds needed to set up for a player kill. So they are in a way nerfing a lot of the strength of Shadow Priests. Maybe not a lot, but they are making it a little bit harder to do your things, whatever it is that is, it seems. Vampiric Touch reduced the percentage healing increase from 10% to 5% and reduced the mana generated from 4% to 2% of any shadow spell damage the priest deals. Okay, that's also, I think, the only thing that was actually really holding back Shadow Priests in original vanilla is their mana. Once the mana pool is spent, they're dead. But until then, they are almost unkillable, right? Especially if they get high levels of gear. Developer comment, while we love how the supportive aspect of Shadow Priest functions, these changes are done to account for the power increase coming with the increase in spell power coefficients and the fact the original talent improved Vampiric Embrace wasn't adjusted in power for the new mana generation factor. While this nerf looks big, the damage increase is a direct improvement to the healing factor to Vampiric, while the mana regeneration is less impacted than initially assumed. Okay. Improved mana burn moved from the discipline tree to the shadow tree. So that's this one. Improved mana burn. Reduced the cast time of a mana burn spell by 0.5 seconds. Holy Nova is now usable in shadow form. Doing so will cause self-damage instead of self-healing. That's, I think, a nice little flavor thing. Light is the opposite of shadow, so of course it would make damage to you once you're a shadow being. And now we have some updates. Power Shield can be cast in shadow form. Developer comment, this was already the case, but the talent builder did not reflect this. This clears that up for good. Okay, so this is actually not a change. It was already like this, but apparently there has been some issues with this. Next up is Enlighten can now trigger off of healing spells. Enlighten being this one, bring a party member under your tutelage. Okay, so they can actually take damage and get the buff when healing, and not only when damaging. That's gonna be very interesting to see how much damage your party members will actually take from this, or yourself for that matter. Proclaimed Champion now also restores a small portion of damage taken by your champion as mana. So that's the 1% that we read here before. You gain 1% of mana of damage taken by a champion. So a very nice little sustain, some help with some sustain here for our healers. And Champion's Resolve has been removed. That was this one. Wards the champion against fear. The next fear effect used against the target will fail. Using up fear ward lasts 10 seconds. That has been apparently been removed and is no longer part of the toolkit. Revive champion cooldown increased from 300 seconds to 45 minutes. Cast time reduced from 10 to 5 seconds. Mana cost increased and can now be used in combat. So Revive champion is now combat res. Even a greater reason to go deep into Holy to get this talent. I don't know how strong it was before. Apparently that wasn't even Resolve. Is it called Resolve? That's this. No, that was the one that was removed. Revive champion. Is that part of the proclamation thing? Maybe it's not. Well, anyway, yeah, it is here. That's this one, yeah. Revive champion. Return the priest's champion to life. So and so much health and mana, and cannot be cast in combat, but now it can, and it's been changed a little bit. So they're getting a combat rest just like the druid has. So that's really good and strong in PvE. Searing Shot, mana cost increased from 5% to 10% base mana. This is equal to 137 mana at max level. And Avatar cooldown increased from 1 minute to 5 minutes. I actually addressed this one before and thought it was very overpowered, but now they've given it 5-minute cooldown, so now it's much more in line with the rest of the racials, priest racials. And then we have another set of updates from the November the 1st, which is when it launched, and they say that the human racial, priest racial feedback has seen its mana burn and damage effects doubled. Okay, and the Night Elf priest racial star shards has been reworked with significant damage buffs. Okay, so Night Elves are getting 2 racials. They're not only getting the searing shot, but they're also getting, they're still having these, isn't that the one they had before, star shards or something? Has been reworked with significantly damage buffs, doubled mana cost, and has a new 30-second cooldown. We've also fixed an issue with the damage model, restoring the behavior of the channel, causing 2 small ticks, 2 medium ticks, and 2 large ticks of damage. The values are as follows. Rank 1, and these are the ticks. So that's quite a lot of damage on the last ticks. You get this at level 10, and the final rank, 700 mana cost, starts off at 240 damage on the 2 first hits, then 360, and then 480. And I'm thinking this is without the spell power. Let's see, they say ranks 3 to 7 have a 0.4 spell damage scaling coefficient. Is that 40%? I'm guessing that's 40% spell power coefficient. While rank 1, 2, and 1 and 2 have a 0.2 and a 0.35 respectively spell power coefficient. Just to make sure that you don't actually use the lower ranks, you want to stick with the high rank to get the most amount of benefit from your gear. Force of Will spell damage boost now applies to channels and dot effects. What is Force of Will? Oh, it's a talent. It's this one. Increase the damage. Increase the spell damage and critical strike chance of your offensive spells. And the damage absorbed by a powered shield. And that spell damage boost now also applies to your channels and dot effects. So that meaning the 5% extra. Was it 5%? Yeah. 5% extra also applies to Mind Flay, and it applies to improve Shadow Word Pain and so on. Reduce the mana cost reduction granted by Searing Light procs from 100% to 40%. Okay, so Searing Light, that was this one. It doesn't make your Searing Light cost no mana, but it doesn't make your smite cost no mana, but it just reduces it by 40%. So you're still getting some benefit. It's not as strong as before. Increase the duration of Purifying Flames from 8 seconds to 10 seconds. Purifying Flames, is that the holy? Yeah, okay, so that's been increased. The buff is a little longer now. And I was also thinking that it was a little bit short. So apparently they have already increased the buff a little bit. Because you actually need to be able to get a few smites in before you're having to cast Holy Fire again to keep this buff going. To actually make it worth the talent investment. And that is it. Some very interesting changes, and I am still worried that at least Discipline seems like it's very, very strong, especially because you're a healer, but with all the utility that Priest has gotten and all the baseline spells on top of the shields and just a ton of stuff now, a ton of extra damage on your smites, and your Holy Fire is just baseline stronger. I don't actually think they did anything with... Oh, yeah, they did something with smite, yeah. They increased the base smite damage by 10% and reduced the mana cost for all ranks. They haven't done anything with spell power coefficient on smite, but it's still, I think it is very interesting and quite strong. Let's go for a PvP discipline build and see what we would get here. I don't actually know about one, but since it gives mana back now, if you're very low, say you're in a duel and you're extremely low on mana, you have to resort to wanding. That will generate mana to you now to make it so that you can keep yourself up, you can keep going, you can keep healing yourself. So in that sense, I would take one specialization over anything, and I might as well just get the extra hit and reduce the chance of being resisted on your smites and stuff. And then we would probably go with Unbreakable Will. I think 15% is a lot, but also improve Power Word Fortitude. That's also a good little buff. I don't actually know how much that equates to in stamina, but I think this one is just big. Being able to resist a stun or a fear from a warlock or another priest, or being able to resist a silence effect. This talent is just crazy strong in PvP. So I think it's worth all the 5 points, honestly. Then I would definitely go for Inner Fire, because that's just 30% or it's just 30 more spell power, right? I think it's I think you would take this, honestly. Inner focus is a must-have, of course, and we need improved powered shield to get to the next rank, which I think you would want, right? Yeah, I think you would want this one as well. Let's do this first. Actually, just want everything on this row, basically, but we can't get all that. Let's see what we can get. We want Searing Light. That seems a little bit too good to pass up on. And then one more in it. What do we get? We can only get 50% chance for Purifying Flames, but then we can get the second rank after, because I don't think this is gonna change much in PvP. Let's go with this. And I think I would actually prefer Meditation over Mental Strength. I'm not sure which one is better, but just intuitively, Meditation seems like it's a little bit better. Again, in line with the mana regeneration. You want as much mana, and you want your mana to constantly continue regenerating. And since there are also items now that does this, I think this will add up and then scale really well. So 10% more mana regeneration even while casting. And then you go 5 points into this one. Definitely, that's a really, really strong talent. And of course, Chastise, which is just an amazing capstone talent. It's just some of the best stuff that I've seen in a long time. This is a 30-second cooldown. It does a ton of damage. It scales great, and it interrupts your target. It functions as a silence, as a complete shutdown, where you have 3 seconds where you can heal yourself and you can make a complete. You can turn a duel completely with something like this. Plus, it functions as an execute kind of spell, right? Instant cast, ton of damage. And you can also use Pain Spike combined with this just to make a ton of damage in one hit. So, and this would also function very well with your Holy Fire. To set up Holy Fire, maybe you'd even start with something like this in a duel, and then try to get a Holy Fire off to get the buff, so you can start smiting your target from a great distance. Then you would definitely go for Divinity. You want that extra crit chance to get the Searing Light procs going. You want those fast casts of both your Smite and your Holy Fire. And remember, this also affects your heals, so your heals are going to be much faster. You want extra range in PvP, that's a must. I don't really think we're going to go for anything in the Shadow Tree. So remember, guys, I'm not big into Priest, so if any of this is just... If you would do something different, comment below, show me the spec. You can actually copy these specs and just paste them in the comment section, and you can show me what you would do for a discipline type of build. I think I'd go for something like this, Blessed Recovery. It seems quite strong, right? 25% of the damage if somebody crits you, which they will be doing a lot. You get that in return as healing, so it's like a 25% less damage taken from crits. So that seems like it's very strong. And then Spiritual Guidance to get that extra spell damage. Remember, this is combined with Divine Spirit. Isn't that what it's called? That was this one before. That has become baseline, and at 60 it gives you a lot more spirit, I think. So something like this, I think, would be a go-to Discipline Priest PvP build. This could probably also function just fine in PvE. Maybe in PvE you would go for a little bit different setup. Some talents, you'd want the threat reduction, I think, and you'd skip Unbreakable Will, and maybe you'd get Mental Strength. But I think something like this would be very, very strong. And then maybe let's, for fun, just make a leveling build. First 2 points into one specialization, and Spirit Tap after that. If you want to level as hardcore, I think Holy Focus would probably be a must-have. But let's pretend you're not hardcore, and you get the Spirit Tap. And I actually don't know how much you would be using Smite early on. I think Wanding, even with the buffs to Smite, is still gonna be better. But I'm really not sure if you would actually just go for Mind Flay or what you would be doing when leveling. Improved Shadow Word Pain, I think, is probably quite good. That's a lot of extra damage, I think. It did increase the spell power coefficient of Mind Flay, but the only thing you're actually getting spell power from is your Inner Fire. And if you want to buff the amount of spell power you're getting, you would want this talent right here. And question is it worth? This is probably still a 3-minute cooldown, this one. I'm really going on a whim with this one, guys, but I think you would just continue Shadow from this point on. Get your Mind Flay, get some improved fear going, make sure the mobs don't resist, and then get Shadow Weaving probably, or Shadow Ridge. That also actually seems like because the more time you can buy until the mob gets to you and start hitting you, the easier it's gonna be, right? And get the Vampiric Embrace and the Vampiric Touch along with some silence. Maybe you would go with something like this, and at this point you'd probably just check out Discipline, Respec, try to go down here. That might be your go-to. It could also maybe be worth it going for Spiritual Guidance instead of Deep Shadow, just if you have a ton of gear with Spirit on it, and then getting the extra damage and healing, that would just baseline affect all your stuff from all your other spells, right? So just maybe that would also be worth it. I think there are many options, and I haven't tested anything of this, so my guess is probably as good as yours, unless you're very, very knowledgeable about the priest and you probably know what to do. But I think that's it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for watching this one. And again, the door is still open. If anyone out there knows a lot about the warrior, knows a lot about the mage and warlock and druid, reach out to me, and I would love to bring you along one of these videos. We just sit, have a chat, go through the changes, and we talk about how this would affect the class in different areas of both the PvE, leveling, and PvP. So yeah, that's it. Remember to like and subscribe. If you like these type of deep dive videos, please subscribe to the channel. I much appreciate it. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Turtles. Where are the turtles? Where are the turtles? Come on, guys, get out of here. Where are the